Come on.
Oh, those on. You've waited your whole life for this. I see you, Hennessy.
What is going on, Jet fans? Matt O'Leary, Jets Chaos, Jeremy with you for another episode of the Reality Check. What is going on? Jeremy, how are you today?
I'm good. Just had my second surgery yesterday on my left eye and just got back from the follow-up appointment and was told that it was a huge success. So I'm happy.
That's great. So we could see? You see perfectly clear out of both eyes?
I don't have the blur anymore. You know, I had a good eye and a bad eye. Now I just see crystal clear, although I do need reading glasses, like severe. I'm farsighted, but I cannot make out my phone without reading glasses. That's one of the side effects of cataracts. You pick one or the other. So if you want to see things far away, you give up all nearsightedness.
So do you wear them like an old librarian at the bridge of your nose and just look down at your phone?
Every once in a while, I'll just do this and say, "Oh, I see. Yes, I see." I do this a lot.
That's a classic. That's a good one. So we got a few things to get into. Last week, free agency week, we reacted to some of the Jets' biggest moves during the first week of free agency. It's been pretty quiet since then. So figured we'd focus on the NFL draft and some particular storylines and getting started with Arman Membou, because that kind of feels like it's become the recent flavor of the week, that there's a lot of people pushing Arman Membou to be the pick for the New York Jets at 7. Obviously a strong NFL combine performance, and his athleticism has bumped him up the charts here a little bit in mock drafts. What's your take on Arman Membou, and if that's a preference for you or not in the first round for the Jets?
I'm really afraid of guys who rise because of athletic ability. Like, I like to see the evidence on film. Now, I admittedly haven't watched enough of them. I don't, highlights is not enough, right? And I'm going to admit now, I'm not going to lie, that I have not sat and watched game film where you watch every rep to really focus on things. I can only go by what I've heard and what I've read. Some of it is, yes, he has great athletic ability, but there is some technique. There is, like, where he's out of position. There are some things that need to be worked on. And sometimes you can get away with it in college when you're so, like in every position, you're so much better than the opponent that you can get away with things that you won't get away with in the NFL. And I also think that we have to consider, as far as the Jets' perspective, what's their scheme preference on the offensive line. Like, I think that based on the way he's described, he'd have a lot more value to a team that's running an outside zone. Although if you're running power gap, as long as he's strong, it's not a bad thing to also be athletic. But I would just think that he's, I would believe we were higher on him if we're going to still incorporate, like an outside zone blocking scheme, just based on the way he's described as very quick, fast, athletic, good in, moving around, movement, things like that.
Yeah, I like the athletic profile that he has, and to me, I think his game would translate well for what the Jets are trying to do in the run game. And I get it, and I kind of fall on the side of, I don't know if I want to use the 7th overall pick to fill the right tackle need after you drafted tackle a year ago. You used the 2nd round pick on center. You used, traded up in the 1st round for AVT. They've used a lot of capital on the position in recent years. So I'm kind of trending in, I'd rather go a different direction. But if they do take Membou, I totally get the thought process, because if you do hit, and if he is an awesome right tackle, then you have your own version of Tristan Wirfs or Penei Sewell, and you have that dominant offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, look, if they as someone who just said that he didn't watch a lot of film, if they love him and they're convinced and believe that he's an all-pro, because you draft a right tackle at 7, you want all-pro. Like, we're not talking about, we don't want the number 10 right tackle in the NFL. We want top 3, top 4 right tackle in the NFL if you're going to use a 7 on right tackle. I mean, that's true if you're taking a guard. That's true if you're, for a few positions. If you're going to use a number 7, that's the goal that you're looking for. It wouldn't shock me, and it would make sense if they love him. If they love him, it makes sense from the perspective of, well, it would kind of look like they're doing Detroit over again, because isn't that the model that Detroit followed, right? The first thing they did was seal up the 2 offensive tackles, on both the left and the right side. So it wouldn't be so shocking to say, where'd they come up with that idea? It's hard. It's difficult, no matter what position, and we talk about this all the time, no matter what position you mention, it hurts in a way of, wow, this is just the wrong year. Like, no matter what the position is, it feels like there's reasons not to. But if nobody's willing to trade up with us, you have to take somebody. So it's just don't miss. I think that's the name of the game. Don't miss.
I think it's so easy to say, oh, the Jets have to trade back. And like, full transparency, if the Jets do trade back and get an extra second round pick to do so, I think it'd be a really good move. But I just have a hard time figuring out who is trading up and for what. Like, I feel like it's just easy to go trade back. Well, you also need someone who's willing to trade up too. Like, there's the second half of the equation there. But I feel like if the Jets come away with Membou or Warren or McMillan or Mason Graham, one of those 4 guys, I feel like it's hard to be drastically upset about any of those picks. And there's reasons or cases to say they shouldn't take that player because there's a preference at another position, this and that. Totally fair. But I think all of those can be classified as big positions of need for the Jets. And I do think all 4 of those players are good players and worthy of going in that selection.
Yeah, especially in this year's draft. My problem is I'm stuck on previous years, right? And there have been better years, but yeah, I mean, the reality is in our reality, if we don't trade back and we pick it and stick at 7, the 4 players you just named, we cannot. I can't complain. I mean, all those 4 guys it feels like have pretty high floors, except for McMillan, but he has such a high ceiling and such a important position of need that I could justify that pick. Tyler Warren has the high floor. Mason Graham has a very high floor. They all work, and Membou, of course, is hard to argue because it's such a position of need, and we want to be this running team. And why wouldn't you want to solidify the offensive line and also solidify the 2 tackle positions for the future? So they all have arguments that make complete sense.
I like this comment from our guy, Dano, who comes in and says, someone would trade up if a consensus top 5 slips to us, a la Sanders, a la Graham. Hopefully, but I would aim for a 3rd because I don't think they'd trade up from very far down. So fair point from Dano here. I don't think it's completely unrealistic that Sanders is there for the Jets or Graham. Would your move be to trade back if one of those guys are there and a team is calling, or would you want to stick and either take Graham or take Sanders? I'm assuming not for Sanders, just based on our previous conversations. But what would your play be in this scenario?
Well, I mean, if you're talking about a 3rd, like Danger is saying, like Dano's saying, it probably means you're not trading back very far, because which means it would still be a top 75 pick, right? Which to me has a lot of value still if you stay in the top 75. If you were talking about 90, now you're talking about a team that's picking after 20. There's no way you're letting somebody come up from 20 to 7 for a 3rd round pick, right? So just the concept of we end up trading back for a 3rd would mean to me we're still picking in the top 15. So we wouldn't be trading back very far, which would spell like maybe the Dallas Cowboys or, someone like that. And that would make sense because you could name players that they might want to trade up for. So I could see doing that. I could see someone picking Sanders. I know that as we've talked about, I'm not interested in taking Sanders at 7 at all, and would not be thrilled. So I think that's the answer. I think, yeah, that somebody might be willing to trade up. If one of those guys slips, I still don't think we're going to get $1 to $1. I think we're going to have to sell it less than the draft value point system. We're going to, like Green Bean said, 75 cents to the dollar. That feels like reality.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. And just looking at where each one of these teams are, I think anything within the top 12, so Dallas as the team that you mentioned, is probably you're getting a third round pick. You can maybe get a second if you trade back with like Miami at 13 to Seattle at 18. But once you get past that spot, like I don't really want to move back all that far. I'm talking like maybe 10 picks at the absolute most to move back.
You want to make sure that you still have the options for guys like Loveland, Igbokwe, maybe like Jabbar, the linebacker, like you want, or Nick, the safety. There's a certain level of quality players that look like, from anywhere from 14 to 23 or something. And you want to make sure that you're going to have that quality tier of player if you trade back. And if you do it, then it's suddenly a good trade, in my opinion, because any of those guys are close enough in value to what we can get at 7 to, where I'd much rather take that guy and, a number, the number 58 pick or something like that. 58 pick and taking, one of those guys like Loveland instead of Warren. I'd rather have Loveland in the 58th pick than Warren.
Okay.
There, I said it.
Yeah, no, and I think that's fair. If that's where your head's at, I can't, begrudge that because, the Jets are going into this draft and after this free agency period where they still have a lot of needs and an extra swing in the second round to go after either a wide receiver, defense, interior defensive lineman, a safety, whatever. You want as many swings as you possibly can. And who knows, maybe I've seen a couple mocks where the Oregon tackle that you like has fallen into the second round. And if that's a possibility where you can land him in round 2, I think you'd have to be feeling pretty good about that.
There's a few other guys too. I mean, to me, there's 5 tackles, right, that I wouldn't mind, all the way from Connerly from Oregon all the way to Ozzie, coming out of Boston College, and then there's like 3 guys in between that, right, that are all very, very, on my board takeable, so like 𝐒𝐮𝐬, I think is pronounced his name,
Yes.
like if he slipped instead of Connerly, that's fine. I'd take him in a heartbeat. So I think there's choices there, and any of those guys, and these guys are guys who played left tackle. So you'd imagine they could make the shift over to right tackle. I mean, just like they did with Sewell in Detroit.
Yeah, exactly. He ends up playing both. Tristan Wirfs ends up playing both. So if you're good enough, you can do that. So I do like that mindset. I like this comment from Kaz, who says, I didn't want Olu because of Mekhi. This year I want Membou because of Olu. Wild how things can change year to year. That's an interesting call out, right? Because before Olu, the Jets missed badly on Mekhi Becton, which was part of the reason why they had to take an offensive lineman and they couldn't take a Brock Bowers last year. But now it looks like you hit on your tackle and you're going, well, you did it once, maybe you could do it again, and then you find your right tackle, and suddenly the Jets maybe have a top 10 line in the NFL.
I think it's the lesson. It's very honest of Kaz. So thank you for that honesty. I think that what that just symbolizes is you have to let the past go. Like the past is the past. A guy you picked is a guy you picked. Like how many people said, you can't take this position because we did that once and it backfired. Well, every prospect is a different person. It's a different player. So you can't sit there and just say, oh, we can't take this position because of this guy. It's the same flawed thinking of we can't take a quarterback out of this school because this guy and this guy flopped. Like you just can't do that. Like that's every player is different. You have to judge and rate and look at the film for each player as an individual player. And I think that's an interesting thing to learn is like, yeah, a lot of people might have never wanted an offensive tackle again because of Becton. And now Olu is like, what would we do if we didn't take Olu right now?
It'd be screwed.
We'd need two tackles. We'd be in so much trouble right now. So, and left tackle is such a prime position. It's like one of those key major positions that you build a team around, right? One edge, your edge one, pass rusher, your left tackle, your cornerback one, your wide receiver one, and of course, quarterback. I mean, that's the foundation of building championship teams.
I like this one from Peter S. says, if you trade back and get an extra second or third, now you fill another position of need with a potential starter in the 75 picks or so. That's a good point. Like, I think the expectation for the Jets has to be first round picks has to be like impact player, especially if they stay at pick number 7. They have to have an immediate impact and be a good starter. But it'd be nice if either if it's 2 in the second or 1 in the second and 2 in the third, you need those guys to be able to come in and contribute right away. I'm not saying be pro bowlers or all pros or anything like that, but I'm keep drawing this comparison, but I'll do it again anyway. In 2006, there really wasn't much expectations for the Jets with the new head coach and new GM. And then they have a great draft where they hit on 2 cornerstones in the first round in d'Brickashaw Ferguson and Nick Mangold. But they did a really good job of finding guys who can contribute in that draft. Brad Smith, mid-round pick. Eric Smith, mid-round pick. Leon Washington, mid-round pick. And no one's going to get confused and say that, Leon Washington's a Hall of Fame guy or an elite level starter, but he was a really good, and those guys were really good contributors on very good Jets teams that went deep into the playoffs. And that was kind of the foundation for those 2008, 9, and 10 Jets. And that's kind of what I'm hoping this draft could be. Yes, get that elite talent in the top 10 and then fill in the rest of your roster with solid contributors.
That's what it is. I mean, as important as it is to hit with your first round pick, it's important to find talent in those other rounds. And this is a draft where I really believe, even though it's not very heavy on the top, this is a draft where we really can. I can confidently, I believe, if I was picking, get us 3, and I hope Moogs can too, can get us 3 guys. One is you're hoping for the high impact ceiling Hall of Fame, number 7 pick, of course. And then number 2, a very good player, and 3, a solid, average to a little bit better player. This is the draft where you really can do it. There are positions that we happen to need that are that deep, that all of that can happen. It really is very achievable. But also, great teams, those 2 4th-round picks we have, the 5th round pick, the 2 6th-round picks, great teams find guys that it could at least fill a role in those places. Like we were talking about Jackson Hawes. You get Jackson Hawes in the 5th round, and he's your solid TE2 blocking tight ends. That's a home run.
Yeah, it's a good role player.
A home run because you fill an important role as you're building your team at very little cost.
And kind of like what Dano's saying here, we need Corley to become a starter too. No loafing man, hit the books and become a man. It like the Jets can't afford for their 3rd round pick this year to be a complete zero. And I know that that's harsh to call, Corley that from last year, but he barely played. He had no impact, and maybe this coaching staff will get him on track, but they can't afford to have a draft class where it's like, okay, you got that one guy in the 1st round, and then pretty much everyone else is off the roster in 2 years or not a legitimate contributor for you.
Yeah, it's really puzzling to understand how we didn't get Corley on the field. Like I understand he had that horrendous play, right, where he made the horrible decision. But outside of that, the one thing he did in the few reps he got consistently, all collectively, was he blocked. And what does that tell me? It just doesn't tell me that he's a capable blocking wide receiver. What it tells me is that he's a willing team player, right? Because part of being a wide receiver that blocks is the ability, but it's also the want and the unselfishness of it. And so he didn't come off as this unprofessional. "No, we're waiting for him to be ready to be a professional." I don't know what that means, because when he was in there, he blocked, which means he played his butt off. In that one play, minus the dropping the ball, the explosiveness was beautiful. So I really want to see this kid get on the field. Like, I really hope that it had to do with coaching and impatience. And I really hope that this kid gets an opportunity, because we traded up to get him. I don't know how the college film could lie that badly. Like, when you watch what he did in college, it's like, how could he have no value? It's just baffling to me.
How about 𝐒𝐿𝐫𝐞𝐞, who chimes in and says, "You sons of bitches got me wanting Membou at 7 and then wide receiver and tight ends in round 2 and 3. So let's play the game. Let's say Membou is the pick at 7, which I don't think is out of the realm of possibilities. Who are players you'd be looking at either position in the 2nd and 3rd round for wide receiver and tight end?"
Well, I think if you want a wide receiver, the best chance, obviously, I think you have a much better chance at getting a tight end in the 3rd round that can start day one and contribute than wide receiver. I think if you pass on wide receiver in the 1st round, you got to grab a guy like Jaden Higgins in the 2nd round. You've got to snatch that up if you want any hope of having a wide receiver starting day one.
I'm with you. I think Jaden Higgins was one of the names that I would mention. Jack Besh out of TCU is another 2nd round guy that I like. And then in the 3rd round for tight end, at that point, you're probably looking at like a Terrence Ferguson, someone of that range, who I think is pretty good, by the way.
Oh, yeah. I put out a tweet the other day. I think he might be one of the most underrated people in this draft class, Terrence Ferguson. He potentially could be I mean, I'm not going to say names because people go nuts when you do that. He could be a great tight end in this league that everybody says, why the hell did we draft him? You know, and there's so many guys that might be there in the 3rd round at 72. That, like, by the way, that 19 spot move up on that correction is so tremendous for us. Huge, because it brings, Mason Taylor is in the picture, at 72. Terrence Ferguson, Arroyo for Miami. Fannin might even slip to the 3rd round at this point, depending on who you're listening to. So there's guys, and one of them will slip, right? We don't know that all of them will slip, but one of those guys, Gunnar Helm, is another one we don't talk about enough. Who's really, I like a solid guy, right? So there's a bunch of tight ends that may or may not be day one starting tight ends and be ready. And I say that because historically, the majority of tight ends in this world don't just come out their rookie year ready to go to their full potential. Like, they do develop and get better and tend to peak in their even 3rd year for a lot of them.
I hope Gunnar Helm falls. I know I just mentioned Terrence Ferguson, who I love a lot and I think would be a home run pick in the 3rd round. But Gunnar Helm is someone who I think his tape is closer to a top of the 2nd round guy. But because of how he tested, injured, by the way, at the combine, for some reason now it feels like he's fallen behind some of like the Mason Taylors and the Harold Fannins and the Terrence Fergusons and guys like that. And Helm, I think, he's a dual threat. Like, he's a pretty damn good blocker outside of Warren and Jackson Hawes. I think Helm is one of the next best blocking tight ends. And we saw the connection that he had with Quinn Ewers at Texas. So I would love it if Helm is there for them at 73.
Yeah, be a great pick. Be a great pick. It would give us a good chance. Like, nobody knows for sure, but all of these guys give us a potential tight end, T1 of the future. And you know what? 25 we knew was going to be tough. It's going to be tough because we're going to be relying on some rookies, and some of them might be great, successful picks, but maybe not enough to contribute to help us out enough as we would want, in 25. But like, we're naming guys that, you might have to wait till 26 to start to shine and 27 to really peak. But I think the way this is unfolding, if it unfolds the right way, 27 to 28 are going to be the years you want them to peak.
Absolutely. Nose Kills chimes in with the super chat. Nose Kills, thanks for the support, my friend. Says, it takes luck and a needy team for a trade back to happen. If the only rationale for a trade back is no one good enough available, no one's going to trade up, which I think is a point that we were trying to say earlier, is it has to be a team that really, really wants a particular player. Is it Dallas who wants the running back 𝐒𝐿𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐻? Is it, maybe the Saints who want to move up 2 spots in the draft and jump in front of who's at 8? The Panthers, I think.
Yeah.
But a division rival or something of that effect. I don't think it's crazy likely that they trade back, but if someone's calling, I think you have to consider, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's 2 things that could make teams want to trade up, right? There's the blatant value when you have a top-heavy guy that's just there. It's one of those kind of drafts where you have to be in the top 10 because that's how many guys there are, right? And I don't think we're in that draft, but I think we are in a draft where, and it could be any draft, where it's just one particular team, right? Emotionally attached to one particular player, where they're nervous that the guy's not going to be there. So Dallas, very, very hands-on owner, right? Pesky owner, gets involved, right? Has a history has won Super Bowls. And that during his best days, what does the Dallas Cowboys have? They've had a great running back, an NFL top 3 running back, Emmitt Smith, then Ezekiel Elliott. We know he likes those kind of guys. If he has that emotional attachment to a guy like Gentry, that's what could make you see a team trade up. And then, of course, if Sanders is on the board when we go, anything is possible because it's a quarterback, right? And then I'll even say, as an outside chance, it could be, and we're going to talk about this later anyway, it could be Jackson Dart that gets somebody to trade up.
It could be. Put a pin in Jackson Dart. We're going to get into that in a little bit. I just want to go through some more comments before we do that. Peter S. has another good one. Do you think if they take Membou in the first, you could see them take Grant in the second for the trenches, then take wide receiver, tight end in the third and fourth? So what would you think about that potential approach?
I think that that's fine if they're thinking like that strategy would tell me they're already thinking 26, 20. Not that they're not 25 is not they're not trying to lose.
No,
I'm not saying that, but this strategy would not necessarily be a bad thing. But it would show patience. This is about patience. What Peter's describing. That's about, we're going to do what's best for the long-term building of this team. We're going to take our offensive and line up the tackles. And if Grant is there in the second, we're just not going to pass up on that, right? This is a guy who complements Q beautifully. It's an awesome thing. We're building in the trenches, and we're going to take a big black guy on wide receiver. But and obviously what it'll mean in 25 is we're going to be running the ball a lot, a lot. Like we're really going to be running the ball. And maybe that's why we're talking to guys like Nash from San Jose State. Maybe that's why we had 2 scouts, at the San Jose State's pro day. Maybe that's the explanation. Maybe we're going to look for a wide receiver in the mid rounds, grab a couple, throw some darts. And if it doesn't happen, we're going to be a running team that is just going to go in with a bad hole in our team, which we all know is a possibility.
I would prefer not to go this route. And it's hard for me to be upset about taking Kenneth Grant. And that's not what I'm saying here. But I do think that there's players later on who could fill a similar role that Grant would play in like the 4th round. And I don't feel that same way about wide receiver. I think the wide receiver fall off is quicker than interior defensive line. And as you've said a bunch this whole offseason, that maybe the deepest position in the draft is that defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, in the 3rd rounds, because if you grab a wide receiver in the 2nd round instead of Grant, let's say you take Higgins, right? Mm-hmm. In the 3rd round, there's potentially Dorian Alexander, there's TJ Sanders, there's guys, there's defensive tackles, there are real guys that can go and start. And we already have a good running plays early down situational guy that we signed from Kansas City. There's LT3, who's situationally a good defensive tackle in passing situations. So if we waited till 3rd, 4th round in the defensive tackle and didn't get the instant gratification of a Kenneth Grant, we could still get a good solid player to develop and still be okay in that position. And so it would be hard to justify, but if Membou and Grant both work out and are all pro players in the future, after suffering through 25, moving on after that, nobody will complain looking back on it, but it would be tough to stomach right now, based on the depth of the defensive tackle class in this draft and the lack of depth in the wide receiver class. Like, to me, it's like the only way, everything else is just rolling dice. But if you want a day one starter, your WR2, you have to invest either your first or second round pick.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I wanted to pull up Fresh's comment. He's talking a lot about Harold Fannin Jr., the tight end in the second round. I have a Harold Fannin Jr. take that might not be very popular, but if you allow me to talk through it, I don't know if he's a great fit for the Jets. Not that he's a bad player, but I think he's closer to a Mike Gesicki type of tight end. That's like a big slot and more of like a bigger wide receiver than he is a tight end. And I just don't know, with the Jets' likelihood of being a run first team with Justin Fields, with their stable of running backs, that they're going to go, I want the tight end who's like a big receiver, pretty much. I think they want more of your prototypical inline tight end. So am I overthinking that, or do you think that's a fair take on Harold Fannin? And
I think it's very fair. I mean, I love him. Don't get me wrong. And the ceiling is through the roof on this kid, right? I mean, he might be really, really special as a receiving tight end, but we're all talking about how we're going to be a running team, and he is not a run blocking tight end at all. So that's the problem with him. He's very one-dimensional, which is why I think that you might see him slip to even the third round. It's not impossible. But if you get a team who's looking specifically for a receiving tight ends, then he justifies a second round pick easily. It's just a question of what are we looking for? Who are we going to be? The only way I can imagine us being high on Fannin and grabbing him in the second round is if we are 100% going to take another tight end in the fourth or fifth round that's specifically an inline blocking tight end, or like Jackson Hawes or even Conyers. I believe he's from Texas Tech. Like you'd have to get one of those guys that are really good and known for blocking. So then it would come as a pair. But if you're only taking one tight end in this draft, I highly, highly doubt it would be Fannin. He just doesn't fit with what we're supposedly trying to do. So I think it's a perfect take.
So again, and not that I dislike the player, I just wonder about the fit with him for the Jets, but something we can get behind depending on what they continue to do after taking a guy like Fannin at that point. All right, we put it off long enough. We got to talk about it. There's rumblings about Jackson Dart to the Jets at pick number 7 again. This time from Todd McShay, ESPN NFL draft analyst, who I want to pull up the exact quote. He said, quote, "The Jets at number 7 should not be ignored drafting Dart. Just don't be surprised if that builds some steam in the coming weeks." I hate this. Hate this idea. Jackson Dart is a third round pick in my eyes because he still needs a lot of development. We've talked about his, the footwork and the throwing motion. There's an athletic profile with him, but the expectations that come with taking a quarterback 7th overall does not match up to the type of prospect that Jackson Dart is. I just help me understand this, Jeremy, because I'm having a really, really tough time.
Hype is a powerful thing. Look, there's a ceiling for Dart, right? That he is a very good NFL quarterback. Like there's a ceiling. There's an argument for that. There is, but that's true for a lot of quarterbacks, right? A lot of quarterbacks have a ceiling of they could be really good if they translate to the NFL, but like that doesn't make them first round prospects. There's got to be evidence of things, right? Evidence has to exist that they could do some things at the NFL level. The problem with Dart is not his ceiling. It's not the things that he's done It's like it's so bad that there's anything not to like about him, where you think, wow, if things pan out the right way for him, he could be a great quarterback. The problem is you're just with the number 7 pick or anybody in the first round taking a quarterback, you have no evidence of it. There's nothing on film that says he could translate to the NFL. There's literally nothing. There's like a lot of production, and there's the hope, and there's some natural talent there, obviously. He's a good physical runner. You know, in spite of his mechanics, makes plays and manages and does some really exciting things. But at the same time, he plays in a make-believe offense. And I know a lot of people will incorrectly say, well, that's true for every quarterback coming out of college. No, it's not. Like, not to this level. If you look at the system that Ole Miss runs, there is absolutely no similarity to that offense and an NFL offense. There's no reality. It's a different freaking game. And that doesn't mean he can't do it. It means that you have no idea. There's nothing to base a judgment on. The guy is running all RPO. It's all one read. It's all just design play. That is not realistic in the NFL. Like, you don't draft a quarterback at 7 where that's the only evidence of what he can do, of what he's capable of. So do I believe that he 100% can't be a great NFL quarterback? No, but he's a 3rd round pick because he's a dice roll. And you know what I mean? And a quarterback, you need to have something on film that shows you he could play on an NFL offense.
I have some notes for why it scares the life out of me at 7. So looking at his games that he played last year, he had 29 passing touchdowns. 15 of those came in 3 games against Durham, whoever that is, Arkansas, and Duke in a bowl game against Duke. 15 of those touchdowns. His 2 worst games of the season were against LSU and Georgia, who, like, nobody spews out more college players to the NFL than teams like LSU and Georgia. They're about as close to an NFL roster as you can get in the collegiate game. And like, the numbers aren't even close. The completion percentage is way down. The yards, the touchdowns, the interceptions, unfortunately, start to rise in those games. And plus, he's undersized. He's 33rd percentile for height, 45 percentile for hands. And like, I don't look at that and go, yeah, that's a 1st round pick. If you want to say there's some things that you like about him, like when he gets in rhythm and when he's showing off his athleticism, I get it. Like, there are some things that make him look like an appealing quarterback, but that's let's take a chance in the 3rd round and see if he could develop a little bit. That's not take him at 7 and have these unrealistic expectations for him to be the long-term answer going forward. I just don't view it that way.
Yeah, he's a project. He's a project like all projects. Like, some people like Kyle McCord. Some people, everybody has these different guys that they like. They're all projects because they're all guys who aren't playing in realistic situations and have not showed on film that, oh, I could see why that would convert to the NFL. And it's, again, if he becomes a star and people say, well, you guys were so wrong on him. No, we weren't, because we're not saying he can't. We're saying that even if he does, hindsight is always easier. It's always easier to go forward in a few years and say, well, where did you miss on quarterback? No one is saying that he can't develop into a good quarterback, that it's impossible. What we're saying is the odds of it, or with the information we have, you can't use a number 7 on it. So yes, he might. Somebody will. Out of all the guys we're naming, there's a good chance that one of these guys will actually be a good NFL quarterback. And whoever supported them and liked them will say, I told you, but then conveniently forget about all these others, right? So it's just, there's going to be so much better of a pool of quarterbacks to choose from potentially next year. It just doesn't make sense to me of why you would take the roll of the dice now.
I'm with you. Wanted to pull up this super chat from Jake. It's a little off topic, but just wanted to pull this up. Thank you, Jake, for the support. Said, so effing sick of spending 1st rounders on the offensive line. Sunk cost, though, for the new regime. I might lean Membou for utility, but the idea of it pisses me off. I'll say it again. I understand if the Jets take Arman Membou in the 1st round, because then you feel great about your two tackles for the long term. You have 5 pretty young guys on the offensive line. You keep AVT at guard. Joe Tippmann's going into year 3 at center. He got better last year. I think that unit would have the chance to be a top 10 unit in the NFL. But I understand where he's coming from with the fatigue as well.
Yeah, I mean, like if I could look in the future with a crystal ball and you tell me that we end up with 𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐷𝐲 and we got him in the 3rd round, I'm much happier than that with Membou in the 1st round. But we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know that 𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐷𝐲 might not go in the middle of the 2nd round, right? Or even before the 2nd round, because it's so unpredictable what teams will actually do. So not knowing is the problem. We don't know if there are going to be guys in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round. We don't know if they're going to be there. We don't even know in the 2nd round if they're going to be there. So that's why if you take a Membou, that's why you can understand it, right? And see what they're doing is because you just it's not the strongest tackle draft, which yes, makes it hard to take Membou at 7, but it also makes it hard to gamble because one thing you want to do while you're building a team, whether you're going to compete in 25 or not, is you want to protect your talent. You want to protect the guys in your skill position. You don't want Fields running around. You don't want your running backs getting slaughtered behind the line of scrimmage. You don't want to you don't want it to be a mess, right? So it's nice to have a foundation. But I mean, I'm with you, Jake, on that. I do believe, and I agree, an entire offensive line should not have to be built on 1st-round picks and on a 2nd-round pick. It should be, you should be able to fill some roles in the middle rounds. It's just a matter of how confident are they that the guys they like to take in those later rounds are going to be there. So it's just like, it's more of like a gamble than anything.
Right. And I've been a victim of this, saying I would take Trapilo in the 3rd round and he would compete with the guy that they signed who was with Pittsburgh, Okorafor, for that right tackle spot. But there's not a guarantee that he'll be there at 73 when the Jets are picking. And then what? Then you're kind of stuck in that spot. So it just depends on what kind of risk you want to take with it. Again, I don't think anyone could be truly upset if Membou's the pick, just because it feels like it's going to fit what their identity is, which is a smash mouth, hard nosed football team.
Yeah. I mean, I think that what we have to remember is, it's not be mad that it took all these 1st-round picks to build an offensive line, but understand how important it is to build an offensive line, right? Like it's so important to build an offensive line that it's really hard to complain. Yeah, it's a bummer that we can't just score a hit in the 4th round, but it's also rolling some dice, right? To wait. I mean, this guy Membou is an athlete. I mean, he's look if they love him, and they believe they can coach him technique wise and get him solid and make him and he's like an all-pro right tackle. Yes, it'll suck that, and you could always complain, oh, we paid a lot for our offensive line, we invested a lot of resources. But if he's an all-pro, you can't regret it. Like then it was worth the number 7 pick. If you end up with an all-pro right tackle, it's a home run. So if they believe that's what he's going to be, it's really hard to argue with it.
Yeah, it is hard to argue with it. And this is a good call out too from 𝐒𝐿𝐵𝐷𝐲 Lake. Says Buffalo Jet fan showed how the 11 playoff teams this year had a majority of 1st and 2nd round right tackles. That is true. And I think it's easier to find interior players in the mid rounds, but unfortunately for the Jets, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, they have those spots filled already. They're not really looking for another guard or a center to start this year.
Yeah, I agree. It's much easier. And even the last few years of being someone that really looks hard and prospects and everything and looking at prospects, I've definitely learned it's much easier to hit in the interior than it is in the exterior. The exterior, it's hard, man. You're looking at the best guys and there are reps, like everyone's talking Will Campbell. I excitedly start watching the film. He's out of position all the time. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? And then someone said, take it easy on the guy. It's just that hard. Like the tackle is a much harder position to play because you have to worry about the outside. You have to worry about wide people lining up wide and coming around. And that's a whole different dimension than being a guard.
Eddie's saying that Trapilo is too tall for right tackle. Do you put any stock into that? I understand where he's coming from, but I don't know. Isn't Jordan Mailata like 6'9"? Like there's examples of tackles who are like 6'8", 6'9" that are pretty damn good football players.
I mean, I don't know how I'm not I mean, that's his take. I've watched 3 full games of all 22 on Trapillo. I watched him at the Senior Bowl. Um, uh, I just don't see that. Like, I don't see it based on what he's doing. He's like so good with both his hands. He doesn't seem like a one-sided cheat to one side type guy. How is he going to adjust to switching over to right tackle? Like, I just don't see any of that. I see a guy who has violent hands, super fast, basically beats the hell out of you with, and I don't think that has a side or a preference. Like, in my opinion, I think that I can imagine him on the right side doing the same thing. Just, he's a really good athlete, very, very fast and quick, strong. And, people do it different ways. What I notice about his film more than other tackles, and what I fell in love with his hands. He just has violent hands. Some people lock up on the inside. They do a really good job of locking up. And some guys do a really good job of punching. He's a puncher. He's a boxer. And it's really, I don't know. I mean, I believe he can do it on that other side. I'm not worried about him at right tackle or left tackle.
Jake with the super chat says, Jeremy, what are your thoughts on Lampkin? I'm assuming we're talking Willie Lampkin out of North Carolina, guard.
I don't know. I didn't look at guards at all.
Small.
I didn't look at any highly regarded guards at all except Miles Frazier. Miles Frazier is the only, and then the center from, I'm forgetting who, that 𝐒𝐿𝐫𝐞𝐞 loves, that he told me about it. I took a look at him. I'm drawing a blank. There was a center that he liked that played everywhere. He played right tackle, left tackle. Then he played last year at center, and I'm forgetting his name, but he's like a fifth round type guy. But the reason I didn't look at guards this year is because you only have so much time, and we just don't need a guard. Like, we're not looking to draft a guard in the early rounds. I discovered Miles Frazier by accident because of Dom C. Dom C said, you have to look at this kid, and he goes, and Dom C discovered him because he was looking at the tackles for LSU, and he noticed this guard, Miles Frazier, and we watched a lot of film, and then we saw him at the Senior Bowl, and he was incredible, and we fell in love with him. But sorry, but I'm not going to weigh in on the guards this year because I just didn't watch enough film.
He's 5'11", 290, which is 5'11" is 1 percentile in height, and weight is 3 percentile. So he's going to need to be stretched out probably 3 or 4 inches, and then maybe put on another 25 pounds before he's considered a true option.
Can he play center? Yeah, Peter, by the way, nailed it. I was talking about Jonah Meinheim. Okay, that's the guy I was talking about. So I watched. I liked what I saw with him because it's hard not to like a guy where you're watching him play tackle, and then you're watching him play center, and then you're watching him play guard. And you're like, oh my god, he can play anywhere. Yeah, and he's a good center. Like, he looked really good at center.
Going back to quarterbacks, Dana wants to know if we have any thoughts on Jalen Milroe's pro day performance. Ran 4.37 40 time, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, look, he looks like an outstanding athlete, but I'm into, and this is a preference of mine, right? That would sometimes work and sometimes blow up in my face if I was a GM. I look for quarterback. I look at pocket passer first. The mobility is all bonus to me. But the first thing I want to know is I want evidence this guy could, if he couldn't run, if he sprained his ankle or an ankle issue and was no longer super mobile, can he win and be a great quarterback just dropping back 3 to 5 steps, 7 steps, whatever it is, and be a go through progressions quarterback? That's my preference. That's what I want in a quarterback. I love mobility. If they have it, that's great. But I have to start there. And you want to take a flyer on him in the mid rounds, fine. But I just don't see anything on him that tells me he's going to be able to drop back and be a full quarterback. He's just a running back. Right now, to me, he looks like a running back that, could throw a football, but not that's going to be anyone I'm going to draft.
Yeah, Dana would go on to say that that's Dom's third quarterback, which is correct. He has Jalen Milroe as his third overall quarterback with a 2nd/3rd round grade. I put Milroe and Dart in that same grouping of guys who probably should go in the 3rd round that are going to go in the late 1st, probably 2nd round, which I think is too early for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's lucky because if they played in a different year where there were more quarterbacks up top, then they might drop down further, right? Like, it's all positioning. In a year like this, I could see either one of them going in the first round with and wouldn't even blink an eye. I wouldn't agree with it, and I think whichever. Please don't be the Jets. I would think whatever team did it is making a mistake, but it wouldn't shock me.
No, it definitely wouldn't. But the athleticism is really impressive with Jalen Milroe, and I don't want to gloss over that because it is. Like he is a very, very unique player because of that athleticism. I just think he needs a lot of work as a passer, which is again why I'm saying third round, because the expectations of taking a guy in the third round, and if he sits for 2 years and you don't see anything from him, is okay. But if you do that at 7th overall, people are going to start clamoring for the guy 8 games into the season if the Jets start 2-4 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, at some point people are just going to put, I mean, maybe what's his ceiling? Like Kyle Murray. Is that his ceiling? He's not going to be better than Kyle Murray. You can't tell me he's better than Kyle Murray was in college. Like he's not anywhere near the prospect Kyle Murray was. So he's not going to be, it would be a shock if he's as good as Kyle Murray. Right. And nothing wrong with Kyle Murray. I'm not giving an opinion, yes or no, or what, but if that's his complete ceiling, and then you consider the fact that he's not anywhere close to Kyle Murray as a college player coming out as a prospect. He isn't. I don't know how anybody can make that a comparison or that argument. Like, would anybody rank him higher than Kyle Murray if you go back in time and put him against Kyle Murray as a prospect?
No, I think Kyler Murray's the better quarterback by far and away, especially after he linked up with what's his face at Oklahoma.
Yeah, so that's why I can't imagine Milroe's a first-round pick. But I mean, I guess the end of the first round, because there's a big difference between the first overall pick and the end of the first round. But right. I don't want him for the Jets. I just don't. And don't get me wrong, because a lot of people say, Jeremy, you're crazy. Kyler Murray would be the best quarterback the Jets ever had. And maybe there's an argument there that that's true. But my counter to that is we're all dreaming of more than that, though. Right? We're all dreaming of if we really want to build a team where we're not completely reliant on building like an Eagles type roster, which is so rare, but go the more traditional route of having a top 5 quarterback and being able to build around that quarterback to get to the Super Bowl. I'm looking for more. I'm looking to wait till 26 and take the Drew Aller or the Manning if he comes out. I'm looking to take the guy who has the ceiling to be a top 5 NFL quarterback.
Billy SBC is saying that we're throwing Travis away like we threw McDonald away. At least McDonald practiced, and you saw a couple of signs from him as a rookie in a limited pass rushing role. I thought he was pretty good his rookie season. But it's really hard to have any expectation for Jordan Travis after missing what's going to be close to 2 years before he sees any NFL action, even in the preseason.
I don't want them to throw him away. I don't think there's any reason to cut him right now or release him. I don't see, and they haven't, and I don't think that they will, because it would be stupid. Like, there's just no reason in my mind why we can't look at him in camp. If we don't draft a quarterback this year, he has a very good opportunity to be the QB3.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he's going to have a real chance. If we draft a quarterback, then it looks like we're throwing him away, unless we draft a guy in the 5th round. But if we draft a quarterback in the first 3 rounds or even the 4th round, you could probably kiss him goodbye. We're probably throwing him away. But I'm not thrilled about it. And it's not that I'm sitting here saying that Jordan Travis is going to be a great NFL quarterback, but I still believe there's a chance he could be a solid number 2 quarterback. And be like a really good backup quarterback in this league. Kind of be like the backup that we have right now in Tyrod Taylor. Like, he might have that kind of career where he's a decent backup quarterback.
Yeah, that wouldn't be the most surprising thing. For me, it's more, I just have no idea what to expect because it's been so long since we've seen him play. Who knows? Maybe he's good. Maybe overachieves his draft status, but we don't know how this regime felt about him when they evaluated him a year ago either, because it wasn't, Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh aren't here anymore. It's Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn. And who knows, maybe they loved him, or maybe they just didn't think he was draftable because of the injury. We have no clue.
Yep. It's hard to say.
Very hard to say. Now this is a interesting prospect debate. How about Richard Hurts for pick 69.
What?
What's the nickname for Richard?
Dick Hurts for pick 69.
There we go. Light bulb
Oh
went off.
my God.
That was a good one. Thank you for tossing that in there. We got a few more in here. Also, Life Force says Travis's agent threw Jordan in the trash, not the Jets. I really hated how the agent handled the situation this offseason, where he kind of made comments blaming the Jets for Jordan Travis having that setback, which I don't think is really all that fair, because the agent was the one who was putting out there that the expectation was for him to be ready for training camp. That came from Travis's camp before the draft. So how could that be spun into the Jets having these unrealistic expectations?
I think that I would feel a lot better about Jordan Travis if he I would feel a lot better if he fired the agent. Like, I think that would show a lot. Like, if he fired the agent, it would be like, okay, good. Not firing the agent, I think that's a strike against him, because it makes it feel like he's in that camp. And that's a ridiculous thing to come out and say, to complain about, like, you haven't played it down, you haven't done anything yet, and you're going to sit there and blame the Jets organization about how they handled you in your injury. I think is a horrendous mistake. And I wish that he had someone advising him to say, fire that agent and let the team know and put distance between you and those comments.
That's what he should do. And that's what I would like to see done as well, just because it's pushing the blame and the narrative on the organization when I don't think that's fair. I think the agent screwed up and is trying to save his ass at this point.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Anyway, all right, we got time for a couple more before hopping out of here. Michael is saying, I was on board with giving Travis a shot. Now with Fields, I'm okay with giving him a shot. If he can pass as good as Sanchez did with his legs, then even in 2026, not desperate for a trade up. I think, look, we just have to wait. We have to wait and see what this guy looks like in training camp.
Yeah, I mean, look, if we could put the team around Fields that we put around Sanchez, we would be a playoff team. Like, and that, like people forget, like, everything is about situation. I do want to say, in fairness to Sanchez, he played really well in the playoffs. He really rose to the occasion, if you remember. He played very well. He didn't turn the ball over. He was very efficient. Like, he really, even though he wasn't asked to do as much as most quarterbacks, and we were a defense running team back then, he really played well. So, yeah, I think if that's what Glenn did, if he built, a wall of just an amazing run blocking offensive line, and we establish an insane running game, and we could solidify the defense and become a stingy, good defense, we could have success with Fields. That's true. But it's always better to have a great quarterback, right? Like, it's always nice to have a quarterback that's not just, I'm okay in this system, protected. But I wouldn't mind also having a quarterback who can do well, and also, when you need him to, run a 2-minute drill.
Yeah. That's the thing. It was like the Jets were in a way hiding Sanchez and giving him a great defense and a great running game to lean on, and that's how they won games. But to his credit, in some big moments, he came up pretty big. So I'll always give Sanchez some love for his 2009 and 2010 run, even though I know it didn't end well.
Yeah. You have to. I mean, it was like, it's all, we have to hold on to what we could hold on to. I mean, that's like, if as a Jet fan, how many things do we have in our history to hold on to that's like that? I mean, the guy played well in the playoffs, well enough for us to win and go to 2 AFC championship games.
It would be nice if the Jets could get back to that point. I don't know if this is going to be the year for it, but I made the comparison earlier in the show. I'm hoping for a draft class similar to 2006, set the foundation for some sustained long-term success from this Jets team, which is something that both Glenn and Muji mentioned in their opening press conference.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's two things could be true. You could be trying to win based on our locker room, our mentality is going to be win, find a way to win with all of our might and energy. But also it could be true that you're also managing the team and making decisions in a way that's responsible beyond just the next season.
Absolutely. I think that's a good place to leave it for today. This has been another episode of Reality Check. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. We're here every Thursday at 3 p.m. Be sure to subscribe to the Talkin' Jets channel for all our live shows during the week, and subscribe to Jeremy's channel and my own channel. But that'll do it. I'm Matt. He's Jeremy, and we will catch you next time.
All right.